We have this for that, stress. Oh my goodness, we'll take this pill and inject that and sub-Q. It's too much.
What's up guys, Derek, moreplates.com. Today we're going to be talking about Jeremy Buendia'S recent blood test results that he presented on his Instagram and his HRT regimen and, you know, his basic, his stack, if you will. A lot of you guys tagged me and sent me this over DMs. This is a fucking 48-minute video though. So there's no way I'm gonna be able to react to this fully. Like frankly, I'm not even gonna watch the whole thing. I'm trusting that Greg Doucette has done his homework. I'm assuming he did because he did a full 20-minute response video himself where he kind of like chops up the most important parts and replies to them with his own rebuttal. So to be honest, like I'm almost going to be doing a reaction to Greg's video more so than the actual main video because he's actually consolidated everything into a palatable, summarized, bite-sized format for me with the main points. So in this video, he goes over his kind of where he's at with his training. He goes into, you know, his physique, where it's at, like why it looks so much, you know, less impressive than when he was a peak Olympian. And keep in mind, this is like a multiple Mr. Olympia winner here. So this strongly reinforces my statements I've always made about do not just listen to the guy who looks the best. I made a video a long time ago called, I don't know, it was like, don't take advice from guys with the best genetics. And to be honest, that advice still stands true. Typically, these kind of individuals are so genetically blessed, whatever the fuck they're given, they hyper respond and then they never actually learn for themselves the intricacies and the, you know, more elaborate mechanisms behind things. They just take shit and it does stuff and it works. They're not necessarily qualified in a lot of cases, I'm not saying everyone, but in a lot of cases to be even coaching, to be honest. I'm not saying Jeremy specifically, I'm just saying there's a lot of guys at the top level who actually barely understand this shit, but their physique represents like the highest tier of like knowledge ever, you would think. But in reality, they're just like the most genetically superior individual ever. And in this video, you know, Jeremy has like found like a basic understanding of shit, but you can tell there's a lot of, you know, intricacies missing. There's a lot of nuance. There's a lot of details that he has, you know, he's not fully aware of. He doesn't really understand how even a, you know, like comprehensive HRT protocol would be prescribed, why certain medications would make sense or why they wouldn't make sense, what would be the most beneficial thing for him in his current scenario based upon his biomarkers and his own physical needs for his performance enhancing endeavors, his injuries, etc., which we're going to be getting into. So anyways, Greg has consolidated this for us and let's get into it. I'm going to be jumping around in Greg's video mainly to the Jeremy parts, but all of Greg's responses are spot on. So I recommend you watch his video, you know, to get his insight on it. We will have slightly different interpretation of things, but overall the general consensus, I've already watched Greg's video, is in line with mine. But there are some specifics about, you know, I'm going to get a bit deeper on the lipids. I'm going to get a bit deeper on the blood glucose. I'm going to get very much deeper on the EQ that he had deployed and its effects on his estrogen. Shit like that is going to be what you can expect from my video. That will differ slightly from Greg's.
Coach Greg, and I've just gone over Jeremy Buendia'S blood work. It was posted 12 hours ago. And I want to explain just how dangerous this is. You're thinking, oh, it's not a big deal. He's not taking that much. Well, this is what happens when you do PEDs. It's not often that a Mr. Olympia champion will post their blood work. And you know why? Because no one wants you to know just how deadly and dangerous taking PEDs really is. It doesn't benefit him to show you that his blood work isn't good. So he had the guts to post his blood work and say, look at my blood work. This is what can happen to you.
Yeah, so he gets into his blood work and he shows like the nitty gritty and he's not afraid to show things that are fucked up, which obviously can compromise your integrity a bit if you're an individual who's supposed to be, you know, the representation of health in the industry or high quality fitness. And you're showing, you know, lipids that look like a fucking, you know, like unhealthy old man. You're showing elevated liver enzymes. You're showing kidney parameters that are equivalent to that of a grandma, shit like that. I'm not saying his are, I'm just saying in general, like a lot of IFBB pros have fucking mangled blood work, and that's even on their crews. And to come out and show that, you know, it's ballsy, because in general, it's very, very rare that you have IFBB pros with spotless blood work. So anyways, we get into it and we get to the CBC with differential. Maybe I can pull this up on the Instagram and have it a bit clearer, because again, this is going to get a bit mangled by the how many times this has been reposted here. Let's see. Fuck, there's no way this is gonna work. Okay, well, hopefully you guys can see this. So we're at the CBC with differential and platelet. You see a high red blood cell count. Now keep in mind, this is like, he's not cranking his face off. This is like his baseline for being on, you know, presumably it's supposed to be on TRT. Let's hear what he says before they jump into this actually here.
You can walk us through it. So you guys, here we are. We did, go ahead. You're better at explaining than I am.
All right, so the very top right here, well, the first thing to know is that the lab kind of makes up the ranges. So we kind of go off of ranges that we found from thousands and thousands of controlled studies and working with thousands of people. So if you're going by these ranges and you see something just a little higher or lower, it really is not that big of a deal.
So again, if you see something that is outside of a reference range, is it something to be concerned about? Yeah, like I would not just brush it off simply because you deem that it is not a problem. You think that, oh, I'm just gonna, you know, eke out another little bit of the reference range here and it's fine. It's, you know, within therapeutic limits. There's no risk whatsoever. It's like, no, like you should be looking at this further, especially if this is your baseline going into exposure to very highly, I don't know, phlebotic type compounds, if that's even a descriptive word to elaborate, but basically he's going to be deploying what he soon elucidates to be 300 milligrams of test for TRT, mind you, plus 100 milligrams of DECA, plus a myriad of other androgen precursors, and outlining how this is a fine hematology profile simply because it's a little bit outside the reference range. Like, this is your baseline, bro. So anyways, let him give the rebuttal here.
It's just kind of a judgment. So right here, the red blood cell count automatically at the top, where it says high, are just outside the range. So some physicians would want you to go donate blood. We typically don't think that that's high enough to do that. So we kind of just will monitor that moving forward.
So in general, if you're on TRT, can you self-correct an elevated hematology profile? Yeah, you can. You know, there are things you can do in order to normalize that don't involve just therapeutically phlebotomizing. However, in Jeremy's case, he is not deploying therapeutic replacement. He's deploying a fucking cycle. So no, this is not something to just brush over and monitor over time and look at longitudinal data and be like, oh, look, over the last year, you've been consistently like fucked. Like, dude, handle it now. Like, that is, you know, you're going to be exposing yourself to like half a gram of shit in totality over the next, for your HRT. Like, this is something to address now, dude. Like, it's not going to get significantly better in any aspect, in my opinion.
Everything else is pretty good. Again, the glucose is 4 points high. So we still think that that's okay. So that's another thing that we'll just monitor in the future.
So no, a 103 is not something, again, to just brush over. This is, especially given the fact that the recommendation for his like injuries and inflammation later in the video is actually MK677, which, you know, is kind of nonsensical in my opinion, but given his fucking comprehensive metabolic panel, his glucose is at 103. Like, do you think adding an MK on top of that is gonna do him any favors? Is this something to monitor over time? Like, no, we know this is only gonna get worse. The guy is adding one of the most problematic compounds in a blood sugar management aspect to his protocol, going to become even more insulin resistant, cranking his glucose even higher, and it's already troubling, very worrying glucose readings already. As a, you know, healthy, fit guy, this is not something to brush over. I'd be like, what the fuck? What the fuck is going on, dude? Like, this is not something to brush over right now. This is something to address immediately before you hop on half a gram of pharmaceutical shit plus a myriad of other random stuff, random peptides, random MK677. Things of this nature are going to be significantly exacerbating this to a point that you're going to be burning out beta cells in your pancreas. Like, you're going to become insulin resistant from this shit. This is not something to brush over.
I've been eating too many sweets at night, so that could be. I'll cut back on
doing that anymore.
Babe, no more cookies at night.
Like, Greg says in his video, does Jeremy seem like a guy who shouldn't be able to handle sweets at night? And it's like, you know, I agree. I'm not saying you should be able to eat cookies and shit before you go to bed, and like that's a practice you should be following. But in general, if you're a fit, healthy guy, like you should have reasonable glucose management and be able to maintain a physiologic therapeutic level rather than walk in, get your blood drawn, and have a 103 at baseline before you're even implementing your growth hormone secretagogues and things of this nature that are going to be cranking this through the fucking roof. So no, this is not fine. This is not something to just cut out your cookies and shit. This is something to get dialed in right now and not be using any of the MK, the testosterone, and any of this kind of shit is stuff that needs to be put on the back burner until you sort this fucking shit out. And same with the androgens, having this hematology profile as is this the time to be adding in DECA on top of 300 tests? Like, no, it's fucking not, dude. This is not the time to be doing that.
All right, that should bring it down.
Let's get back to the Greg video because he has his own commentary that is relevant. He basically says the same thing as I do, as far as I remember, but the CBC. Let's see.
Points high.
So he looks at his blood glucose, which is also highlighted in black, and it's high, and he says, well, it's just 4 points high. It's not a big deal. When I see people downplaying high or low results, it makes me think that they're comparing them to other people who are abusing PDs. Imagine if he was natural and he showed this kind of blood work. The doctor would say, what is wrong with you? We need to do something. We need to make you healthier. But because he uses PDs, you're comparing him to other people that use PDs and saying, well, in comparison to that pro bodybuilder that died, well, it looks pretty good.
This is spot on. Like, how many times have we seen guys be like, oh, you have a 30 HDL? You know, given like the fact that you're a bodybuilder, like that's okay. You know, given the fact that you're on androgens, like that's kind of normal. It's like, just because it's normal for bodybuilders to have a fucked up lipid profile doesn't mean like you can create your own level of normal and be like, you know what? Healthy naturals are actually around like 70. But you know what? Because you're on test, DECA, fucking DHEA, MK677, testosterone, the whole shebang of fucking pharmaceuticals, it's fine that you're at 30. Like that's pretty normal for bodybuilders. Like, no, dude. Like, this is not how you should be interpreting blood work.
This is not good. You do not want your glucose to be elevated. I've never in my life had elevated glucose, ever. I'm a professional bodybuilder, abused PDs for over 10 years. If I, as an abusive steroid-using bodybuilder, have never been high on blood glucose, what makes them think it's no big deal?
We still think that that's okay. So that's another thing that we'll just monitor in the future.
Well, if it's bad, what's the good of monitoring it if it's already bad? Yeah, you're unhealthy. We'll just keep looking at you being unhealthy.
Yeah, exactly, dude. Like, couldn't have said it better myself.
Right now.
I've been eating too many sweets at night, so that could be. I'll cut back on
doing that anymore.
Babe, no more cookies at night.
Sounds like Coach Greg. Babe, no more cookies at night or pickled pizza or candies or wine.
With the cholesterol, it's not too bad. The LDL cholesterol is a little high.
Are they looking at the same set of blood work that I am looking at? I see cholesterol total, high. If it's in bold and says high, it means it's not within range for about 98% of the population. How is having higher cholesterol than 98% of people not bad? You have high cholesterol. You shouldn't have high cholesterol. You're an athlete. High cholesterol. This is bad. Yeah, it can be genetic, but probably caused by the PDs.
Okay, so when you look at the lipid panel, we see total cholesterol 200 milligrams per deciliter. We see the HDL at 37, its triglycerides are 92, LDL 146, So off the bat, we can see that things are not good. You know, this is not something to skim over. This is something that is, you know, in general, I would say the most problematic component of bodybuilders' blood work historically is you're going to see elevations in hematology. And this is like even on, you know, just TRT. I'm not saying that, like, obviously it's pretty easy to get elevated liver enzymes, get, you know, fucked up kidney markers and whatnot. But in general, like, the thing that is the most hard to control that I've seen in blood work time and time again is having a good HDL level. And this reference range, you know, ending at 39, you know, that's generous, to be honest. Like, some labs would want to see you at minimum 50 before they would deem you like normal or healthy. So anyways, this is the hardest thing to control for most individuals from what I've seen. But this total cholesterol of 200, this LDL of 146, like, this is shit that should be in check right now. And I'm not, again, this is circling back to the HDL for bodybuilders. It's like, yeah, it's often low. A lot of guys have low HDL, and even the guys that are healthy, it's like very infrequent. You'll see guys with, you know, an HDL over 60 who are on exogenous androgens, but it doesn't mean it's okay just because that's normal for bodybuilders. It's something you still want to be looking closely at and trying to mitigate and attenuate as much as possible and try and get that as high as you can and mitigate the detriment to the total cholesterol, the LDL, having your trigs in range, etc. So I guess let's hear what his feedback is on the lipids here, then I'll kind of give my stance.
HDL cholesterol, well, that's low, that's good, right? Sorry, HDL is good cholesterol. You want to have more of it. So he has low cholesterol. This is a very common side effect from taking testosterone or other steroids.
Were you fasted for your test?
I was, man, but you know, it's only 1 point up above the normal range.
So he says he's fasted too, and he had the over 100 glucose, and they think it's fine. Like, I'd be like going back to that right now and being like, what the fuck, dude? You were fasted and that was your blood glucose, and we're about to throw you on, well, everything he's about to recommend, half of it goes out the window based on that blood test result. And it's just baffling that this shit is being skimmed over.
I'm sorry, I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but it's not good. And the fact is, this is what we do as bodybuilders. We say, well, I know that steroids are not good for me, so obviously it's going to have bad effects on my blood work. So the fact that it shows that, well, it's to be expected. I accept that I'm not healthy. But you can't sit there, make a video and say, oh, it's all good, and downplay everything and say it's only 1 point over, it's only 4 points over, it's only a little bit over. You should be making a video and saying, see, this is the side effects of taking steroids. If I didn't take steroids, my blood work would be a lot better. So don't take steroids, but if you do, realize that this could happen to you and it could be a lot worse.
Next, right there, we'll see the testosterone.
So I've been back on tests for like 4 weeks, and I took a shot the day before. I didn't know I wasn't supposed to.
How are these people this advanced in bodybuilding and don't know the basics of testosterone use? I don't get it.
Yeah, okay, so before we get to the testosterone, going back to his lipids. So again, remember the fact that he said he's fasted and he had the 103 glucose from earlier in the blood test results. So this is very, very concerning and something that needs to be dealt with immediately. And then from a diet aspect on the lipids, this is something that is, you know, not only reflective of PED use as well as, you know, potentially genetics, but in addition to that, total cholesterol and LDL are going to be very, very influenced by dietary practices. Now, this is something that, you know, commonly goes overlooked as some people, for example, are even hyper responders to eating just eggs. And I know this is something that, you know, Rhonda Patrick historically has always talked about, how there's almost no difference to adding in eggs. And it's like, I have the before and after blood work to fucking show otherwise. And there's a lot of new data that has emerged that has showed it's not necessarily the case. There are certain individuals that are hyper responders to certain kinds of foods. There are certain individuals that can have significant aberrations in their blood work just by having minor alterations in their diet practices. And for this, like, this is obviously something that needs to be looked at not only from a dietary standpoint, but potentially from a pharmacology standpoint too. I would not be glossing over this, and I would not be trying to band-aid it simply with something like a citrus bergamot, a niacin, something like that. I would be looking at something like ezetimibe, probably. This is a recommendation of, not a recommendation, something that Leo has kind of brought to the surface of the bodybuilding space over the past year or so, a very relatively benign medication that can reduce your LDL by as much as 20%, increase your HDL as much as 5%, drop your trigs by 8 to 10%, all concurrently with almost no side effects, at least, you know, based on the clinical literature and a lot of anecdotal data at this point is very promising. This is something I would be, if I was Jeremy, talking with my doctor about. I would not be just skimming over it and being like, oh, it's a couple points around, like it's fine, you know, cut out the fucking cookies. Like, no, bro, like this is something that is fucking serious, especially given your diet model. It sounds like it's pretty inflammatory in nature, given you literally talking about your inflammation in this video, you talking about some of the foods you're eating that are not good for you. Like, do you think you're not depositing plaque with a fucking 144 LDL and the current diet model you're following, as well as the PEDs on top of that, and then saying like, oh, it's probably just fine, I'm gonna continue with my 300 tests, 100 DECA, plus every fucking else thing that they're going to mention in this video. There's a lot of stuff in here. All while this happening, like this is not optimizing health. A lot of this is actually exacerbating existing problems. So no, this lipid panel is not good, especially as a baseline. This is something that needs to be managed immediately, in my opinion. So that is some of the stuff I would be looking at, including the ezetimibe. I think is a very, very smart idea to be looking at. Not necessarily saying you need to do it. I'm saying this is something you should discuss with your doctor. It's far less problematic than traditional statins, and it seems to be fairly well tolerated, and it has pretty significant benefits in a lipid modulation aspect for bodybuilders from what I have seen. So anyways, getting back to Greg's 2 cents.
You might think you need to be a genius to understand this stuff, that you need to have Derek from More Place, More Dates vocabulary to get this and interpret this. This is easy stuff. He's been on testosterone for 4 weeks. Every time you do a shot, your testosterone is going to rise. And as the days go by, your testosterone is going to get lower. A normal shot of testosterone is going to peak around 3 days after the shot. If you're getting blood work done and you're on HRT or doing steroids, you should be taking the test halfway at the midpoint between doses. So his test results would actually be lower the day after a shot than if he had done the blood work 3 days after the shot. So Coach Greg is at 710, which is on the higher end of normal. You can see it says 264 to 916. I'm at 710. Jeremy is above 1500. That means it's well over double what mine is. Does that sound like HRT? I hope you said no, because 300 to 400 milligrams of test a week is a cycle. It's a steroid cycle. So when you're doing 300 or 400 milligrams, you're thinking it's a low dose. Well, low compared to most professional bodybuilders, but extremely high compared to what you need for HRT.
I typically would like you, if I had my own personal preference, to be a little bit higher, which is still fine. But since the ranges are there, physicians kind of have to cover their butts.
Well, yeah, they do, but it's also because it's not healthy to have extremely high levels of testosterone.
So yeah, everything Greg's saying about, you know, understanding when your test is peaking, when to actually have a blood test that's reflective of your levels rather than having artificial elevations or artificial dips. This is something you're going to be timing through your, well, obviously you have to factor in administration frequency too, because things are going to differ if you're microdosing to have more stable blood serum concentrations versus an individual who is, you know, it depends on the clinic. Like some guys are prescribing people to pen test sip once a fucking week. Some people are prescribing once every 2 weeks. Like it's insane. So obviously you have to keep this in mind when it comes to when you're going to be pulling your bloods versus an individual who is, you know, let's just say you're microdosing on a daily basis to have blood serum concentrations that are as stable as physically possible, have less problematic side effects in terms of an estrogen aromatization aspect, stuff like this. It's going to be a bit different in terms of the importance of when the bloods are drawn. But yeah, you want to be timing it accordingly rather than just arbitrarily taking your blood at a time that makes no fucking sense based on your peak serum concentration. So anyways, Greg, you know, everything he says is spot on here. Let's keep going.
Yeah, it's fun. You build more muscle. I'm not saying it's not fun to have higher levels of testosterone, but it doesn't come without negative side effects or consequences. When you have higher testosterone levels, it can come with other negative side effects. Did we not just go over his cholesterol? Did we not just go over his blood glucose?
Yeah, so this is, again, even factoring that, that is problematic. But in addition to that, having cardiac remodeling, having kidney stress, having direct, overly, I don't know, like a stress-ridden brain even, being perpetually stressed out from being in a more sympathetic dominant state through heavy androgen exposure, this kind of shit on a perpetual basis too, because this is something that's going to be in your system for, it's like a bleed in your system. It's not like it's spiking and peaking and having a pulsatile nature like natural endogenous steroidogenesis. This is something that is bound to an ester and bleeding into your system in a stable manner. You're having this perpetually enhanced sympathetic drive, putting you in a more adrenaline-ridden state. This is overall going to be burdensome on your body and not be healthy to be constantly redlined and in super physiological territory. So yeah, let's look at the hormone panel again really quick here. I just want to see exactly what the levels were at. So we had the total test was undetectable because it was not even reading it over 1500. So they did not in fact get high sensitivity testing. They got standard immunoassay, which is unfortunately going to be way the fuck off, especially because this guy had EQ in his system, which he goes over later. His free testosterone, picograms per milliliter, again, not high sensitivity testing. He got the direct testing from LabCorp, which, you know, I hate that test. I've done a video on it before. And he goes over here and he literally fucking, he literally says in the video that we'd want to see that higher, which I don't know if I'm misinterpreting and there's some context behind what he's saying, but like when people say like we want to see something higher, sometimes like it's not necessarily indicative of high quality interpretation. Like I want to see this number. Trying to shoot for an arbitrary number, not based on symptoms, not based on fucking anything except the number in your mind being good, is silliness sometimes. Like seeing, like I understand trying to shoot for like a certain level in a therapeutic reference range, but when you're saying like I want to see you at like 2000 nanogram per deciliter test, it's like why, you know? Like there's individuals who are going to build more muscle with a quarter of that than a guy who's at 2000. Like why do I have to be at this arbitrary, like random fucking number? Like based on what? Like is it based on symptom relief, or is it based on the fact that you think that number is the generally universally applicable optimal number for everyone to be at, when in reality it's just an arbitrary number pulled out of your goddamn ass that makes absolutely no sense, you know? Like I understand the difference between like if I saw a guy at like 200 versus a guy at like 700, I'd probably be like, I would rather see you at 700 than 200. But when it's like you're fucking super physiological, like how could you possibly be like, I want to see you at here, you know? And when I see these predetermined, like I want to see you at numbers in these kind of like cookie cutter HRT models, they will be like, I want your thyroid here. I want your testosterone here. I want this here. Like that stuff is not based on actual like biological feedback. It's based on arbitrary numbers that in general you might see symptom relief, but it's not relevant to the actual person. Like you should be going off of biological feedback rather than arbitrary numbers on a piece of paper at the end of the day. They are good guidelines having these numbers and having these ranges, but saying like you need to be at this number or else we haven't achieved symptom relief or like optimized hormones, it's like, it's just silly. And I don't know why a lot of clinics still do that.
Did we not go over his red blood cells and hematocrit? Did it look healthy to you? Imagine what his blood work would look like if he was taking what professional bodybuilders take. 10 times these doses. And add to that orals and fat burners and everything else they're taking.
When it comes to your thyroid, his number is pretty good. We typically like the TSH lower to be around a 0.5 and the T3 around 4.5.
He's 100% normal. Thank goodness something's normal here. And they're talking about, well, maybe we should optimize and change and do all this stuff. No, don't do anything. You're good. You're good.
Yeah, so it's like, again, if your TSH is like in range and everything's functioning correctly, because your TSH isn't bottomed out because you have so much fucking T3 that is not providing the feedback to tell your body, oh, we don't need more TSH. Like, does that fucking mean we need to be supplementing you with exogenous thyroid? No, like there's a point where it's like the hormone optimization gets a bit over the top in some of these clinics where they're like, we need to dial in like every fucking thing possible and start replacing everything and manually backfilling it so it's right at the top end of the reference range, or else you're not a peaked human being. So, you know, some of this shit should be left with if it's fine. You don't want to be replacing stuff unnecessarily when you don't need to be.
You're going to give him some thyroid medication? Why does he need that? Has he not got my cookbook? Low calorie, delicious meals. They keep you full. You don't need some thyroid medication to burn a few extra calories. Just eat a few less.
Like, I don't even think, like, Greg's saying that, but I think it goes above and beyond that. I think he's literally looking at it and saying, like, in general, your thyroid would be maxed out within therapeutic limits if your TSH was here, because you would be producing less TSH if you needed to produce less T4 subsequent to T3, blah, blah, blah. Everything would be peaked out at these levels. But again, it's an arbitrary number on a piece of paper. Doesn't mean you can't be healthy with a TSH of, 1 to 2 or 2 to 3. Like, sure, you might see some symptomatic individuals as the TSH gets elevated. And obviously there's a point to the reference range to begin with, but it's not like everyone needs to be fucking dialed in. Like, it's not like every single person on TRT needs to have a 999 nanogram per deciliter total T, or else they're not optimized. Like, it doesn't work like that.
Should have just said, hey, look, thyroid's great, awesome, next. And what is next? His estradiol levels are crashed. Why does he have extremely low estradiol levels? He shouldn't have low estrogen levels. He should have high estrogen levels. He's taking testosterone, converts to estrogen. Why doesn't he have high estrogen levels? My guess, probably taking Arimidex, and too much of it. But let's see what happens.
To be honest with you guys, I did do 2 shots of EQ a week before my injection.
What else is he taking? And was this taken before the 4 weeks of testosterone or the day before the testosterone?
It's almost like this guy needs a new baseline entirely, like saying, like the hematology could be significantly fucked with from the EQ. Like, we don't know what the hell is causing what at this point.
Not really sure, but it doesn't make sense that his estrogen levels are that low, and they're not that low from taking EQ.
So that is where I will have my own insight, but let's let them explain.
Everybody in the gym talks to somebody who's taking testosterone, and everybody says, oh, you need an estrogen blocker, right?
Yeah, if you take too much testosterone and you're sensitive to estrogen, the chances are you're going to get gynecomastia. And the answer is not, you just add EQ. They're making it look like if you add EQ, you won't get gyno or bitch tits. I don't understand where they're coming from. This is not scientific.
Okay, I'm gonna fast forward to the part in the Instagram video because they actually do go over something that is, it's not like you're gonna find this necessarily in the clinical literature based on human data, because frankly, there is no Bull-to-no data for us to reference, but it does indeed compete for aromatase, as do all other steroids, and it does interact with it and produce its own unique estrogen metabolite, which inherently is far less potent than estradiol from what we've seen anecdotally. And in addition to that, it does in fact crash estradiol. I did a video a while ago. I actually did one of my most recent, not like they're recent at this point, but my most recent articles on moreplatesmoredays.com called Does EQ Boldenone Act as an Aromatase Inhibitor? And I did a giant deep dive into the effects it has on aromatase, what it does, why it crashes estrogen levels, what effect it has in terms of, is it inherently anti-estrogenic? Is it competing for aromatase? What is it doing exactly? And what unique metabolites does it produce? Because again, we see in the book called Anabolics by Llewellyn, it is commonly stated that EQ converts at 50% the rate of testosterone to estradiol, which is not the case whatsoever, and why we would have assumed that a synthetic anabolic steroid derived from testosterone would convert into exactly bioidentical estradiol when no other synthetic anabolic steroid converts to estradiol would make absolutely no sense. When you look at methandrostenolone, Dianabol, we see that it converts into its own version of methyl estradiol. This is something that is not the equivalent to bioidentical estradiol. This is totally different. So why would an injectable format of a drug that is essentially identical to Dianabol be different in that it would convert at 50% the rate of testosterone to estradiol? It does not. It also converts to its own unique estrogen metabolite. And while this is picked up in the clinical literature as estrone in rodent models, this is also detected through electrochemiluminescence immunoassay blood test results, which, as we know, cross-detect estrogens that are not themselves. So we have cross-detections of estrone when you actually look through high-sensitivity testing using liquid chromatography with tandem mass spectrometry to assess for estrone levels on guys who are on EQ as well. So we're having a cross detection of estrone, commonly misinterpreted as estradiol when you're getting ECLIA methodology for your blood test results. And that's why if you get ECLIA methodology for your nandrolone or your EQ or your whatever, you'll have a normal looking estradiol level. But then on paper, when you get high sensitivity testing, it's way the fuck lower and it's actually crashed often because these are competing for aromatase. Now again, obviously this is different depending on the amount of tests you're on. Like, this is the first time I discovered this was when I was doing a nandrolone only experiment, and I started to realize how much different the results were using standard immunoassay versus high sensitivity testing results with the exact same sample of blood. And I started to dig further, and I started to find more examples of this, and I started to find more interactions with aromatase with other steroidal hormones, and I realized, like, oh shit, this is like happening all over the fucking board, and guys' blood test results are not even accurate when they're getting their test results done on their blast phases. They're using testosterone derivatives, DHT derivatives, 19-NOR derivatives, and they're getting immunoassay test results and not getting accurate representations of their test levels are being artificially elevated by 19-NORs and other compounds. They're getting estrogen levels that are being artificially elevated by estrogen metabolites. All their blood work's all over the fucking map, and it's inaccurate as fuck because nobody's getting high sensitivity testing when they should be. And even when they are, they don't know how to interpret it correctly. So when you look in the literature, you see cross detections of estrone. And when you look at a guy who's on EQ and gets high sensitivity testing done of his estradiol and his estrone when he's on a lot of EQ, in fact, you see they're both in the ground and something is artificially elevating them through a cross detection, which I assume to be something like an analog to the methandrostenolone estrogen metabolite that is produced by Dianabol. So again, this is why his estrogen levels are in the ground, in my opinion. I don't think he's randomly, like, accidentally taking aromatase inhibitors. I think that he is in fact using EQ at a dose that is crushing his estrogen, not crushing it in itself, rather it is competing for aromatase and producing an estrogen that is not traditional bioidentical estradiol. So anyways, when we get into the blood test results, let me see if I can pull it up and actually show you guys, because this guy basically just explains sort of what I just explained, but in a more consolidated fashion. Okay, so here we have the estradiol. Now, again, interestingly enough, though, it's being assessed using Roche electrochemiluminescence immunoassay methodology and still getting a 5.0. So again, this is like unpredictable shit that no one really knows how to interpret it. No one really knows what's going on. We just know anecdotally we will see artificial elevations of estradiol in general with things like nandrolone, in things like boldenone, can compete for aromatase and cause crushing of estrogen too. And in general, when you do the high sensitivity subsequent testing to kind of figure out what's going on, or ideally you would just get that preemptively off the bat, you would see that the hormones that you would think are where they're supposed to be are not whatsoever. And you'll have a random elevation in estrone while you're on this EQ rather than your estradiol. And then when you look further through high sensitivity testing, you'll find, in fact, your estrone might not even be elevated, rather it's some other fucking thing that you're not even testing for, like the whatever boldenone converts into via aromatase, like, you know, Dianabol. It's not like you're going to literally detect bioidentical estradiol through high sensitivity testing, finding methyl estradiol or some shit. Like, it's not going to work like that when you have actual LCM-SMS testing. You're going to find what you're actually looking for. So when you look for estrone or estradiol using high sensitivity testing, you find that boldenone is doing some off-target fucking shit with aromatase. Not off-target, but it's converting to something that is not, it's foreign to the body. It's not something produced like an estrone, an estriol, or an estradiol. Rather, it is its own synthetic estrogen, as you would expect from a synthetic parent compound to begin with, just like Dianabol. So again, I'm not surprised to see this undetectable estradiol despite the fact that he's on test, as well as EQ, because EQ historically, anecdotally, has crushed a lot of guys' estradiols into the ground. And then you wonder, you know, why does EQ cause anxiety in some people? Why does the EQ do this? Why does it do that? You know, for a lot of individuals, I imagine it's through this interaction with aromatase, and it seems pretty fucking potent, at how hard it binds. It seems to compete even at relatively benign, you know, dosages. The back in the day on the UGL fucking forums and shit, we used to think that, you know, anything under 600 milligrams of EQ was like weak. You find that even like relatively low, you know, low numbers, like 300 milligrams EQ, very sufficient for crushing estradiol levels. So you'll have individuals who show up with this shit. You know, it's very, very problematic in that regard. And it's another reason that compound might want to be avoided entirely. It is very, very kidney toxic. It's very rough on your hematology. It fucks with your estradiol significantly to the point that you can't even produce bioidentical estradiol via your testosterone base in most cases. And yeah, it's not very fucking good, to be honest. It's not a great compound in my opinion. And it's, at the end of the day, for veterinary use anyways, pretty much anyways. It's not a human approved compound. It's not something that's necessarily, the ROI is not necessarily there for it, put it that way. So anyways, they kind of detail that in this video. But moving forward, let's go on to the next set of bloods here.
Cutter places say that you need an estrogen blocker right away.
No, nobody says you need an estrogen blocker right away. Some HRT clinics are giving people estrogen blockers when they don't need them. If you're on an actual normal amount of HRT, like Coach Greg, 120 milligrams a week, and you get your blood work back and your estrogen's in the normal range, you don't need to take anything.
Yeah, so most individuals, and I've said this many times, is they're unnecessarily using Arimidex and Anastrozole when they do not need it. In general, you should be able to tolerate the estrogen production via your TRT. It's not something that, now again, obviously there's genetic outliers in certain individuals with poor estrogen metabolism and or, you know, polymorphisms in their gene expression via IGF-1 and stuff like that, or, you know, high prolactin levels chronically. Stuff like this is going to play into it, obviously, but in general, most people are going to tolerate therapeutic TRT just fine. Now, if you're on fucking 300 tests plus DECA plus other shit, yeah, maybe you're gonna run into problems. But for the average person on actual TRT, you should not need an anastrozole.
The problem is that most professional bodybuilders, or bodybuilders in general, are taking testosterone at ridiculously high doses. They're not taking 100, 200 milligrams a week, taking 500, 1500. And for those people, most of them are going to need Arimidex or something to control their estrogen.
But that's why you need to get your blood work and you need to get it regulated, because otherwise you're playing Russian roulette with your body. You don't know.
Yep.
Everybody's different. You're guessing.
And it might sound like I'm picking on Jeremy, but trust me, he is doing a huge service to the fitness industry. To show his blood work and be open about it, that takes courage. And he's saying this is why it's so important to get your blood work. You can't just make guesses. So many people don't want to know. Ignorance is bliss. You need to care enough to get your blood work.
Yeah, it's definitely true. And to be honest, like when he saw his blood test results and he saw things that are out of range, he could have easily said, you know what, I don't want to publish this. I don't want to talk about it because this is not going to reflect well on what I'm doing. Even if he doesn't necessarily like understand fully like why stuff is where it is, having anything that is fucked with as an IFBB pro, who's an Olympian, who's somebody who's supposed to reflect like, you know, high quality industry image, it doesn't look good to have a crushed HDL, to have a cholesterol through the fucking roof. Like these are like obese fucking person levels for a guy who's supposed to be the epitome of men's fitness. So yeah, it does take a lot of balls for him to talk about this stuff. So definitely has, give him kudos for that. But yeah, again, like a lot of his stuff needs to be handled and it is not being handled in the video, unfortunately. Like this is stuff that they could have elaborated much further on why you should not be pursuing some of the hormone interventions that they are before managing some other stuff. And frankly, a lot of the hormone interventions are far too aggressive and make no sense from a hormone replacement therapy aspect. It's like far too aggressive.
Whether it's through your doctor or some other website, you need to do it.
And that's why I'm doing this. I'm putting myself out there for you guys, all 500, 600 people that are watching this. I'm excited for you guys to get this information because it's very important.
Don't make the mistakes that we did when we were younger. We didn't have all this information. Think of it, I'm 45 years old. You think I could go on YouTube and learn about PDs when I was younger? There wasn't even a YouTube.
No, we had forums who were saying, you know, take your 500 mgs a test and shut the fuck up. That's the kind of shit that we had. And, you know, before that, no forums, you know? You had the guy in the gym telling you to take 500 mgs and shut the fuck up.
Not only that, but my appetite is complete shit. Like I can't eat. And that's been something that's, you know, been really bothering me.
Does Jeremy look like he needs to eat more? I do not see a person with a disorder that needs to eat more, that's underfed. You don't need to have a massive appetite and force feed yourself. You can put on muscle by just eating what you're doing. Anorexic, you're not skinny. You're eating enough food.
I've been trying, dude. I've been digging. I've been trying to go to the gym and train. My body is, I can't recover. I'm sore.
And he's saying he's sore and he can't recover, yet he's on EQ and testosterone. Imagine how he'd feel if he was natural. Trust me, he'd be way worse.
Now again, this kind of goes to, is less more? You know, a lot of times, again, on paper, more milligrams is going to equate to more muscle in general, all factors equated. But again, if you feel like shit, you can't even get to the gym, you can't recover, you feel like you're fucking inflamed, you feel terrible, your blood glucose is elevated, your lipids are all fucked up, is less going to be more? Like there's individuals who will actually find, like even like on just tests, not, you know, factoring EQ and all the other shit he's about to outline, that sometimes they do better and gain more off less tests because they are less side effect ridden. If you feel like shit on what you're using and it's preventing you from actually getting good workouts, getting to the gym, resting properly because your sleep is all fucked up, because you're, I don't know, chronically anxious because you have fucking crashed estrogen, you're on EQ, like at that point, like you'd actually be better off with less, and less is more at that point. So it's not a coincidence why a lot of guys in the future, well, a lot of guys when they do shit in the future after like doing a lot of shitty cycles or like very abusive cycles, they'll end up taking less and making better progress because everything else gets dialed in, because everything is more, when you're healthier, you can do everything more correctly. Everything's more facilitated properly through sleep hygiene, through a high quality diet model, through this, through that. Not feeling like dog shit all the time, not having organ stress all the time, not having oxidative stress cranked through the fucking roof all the time. This is stuff that goes overlooked, and they look at the sheer milligram amount rather than the effects it's having on the body in other aspects rather than just a pure androgen receptor activation context. So again, like with Jeremy, you know, would it not make sense to kind of like reel back to the fucking bare minimum therapeutic replacement and see like where his baseline is at that point and get him feeling good on that, and then look at titrating up based on performance enhancing outcomes? Like that would probably make the most sense. Like correct the fucked up biomarkers, get your health in check, get down to a reasonable baseline, get that set point, get everything cleaned out, get healthy. Once you actually have that lined up, then start titrating up and looking at the super physiological shit rather than just going balls deep right now and throwing things off even worse. Because right now he's about to go into things that are going to fuck up his blood work even more.
So part of the problem is in fact the fact that he has crushed estrogen levels. I personally think he's taken something to lower his estrogen, but I just don't know. I don't know. I'm not him. I don't know what he's taking. Who knows? He's probably taken 10 different pills, doesn't know what they are.
Yeah, it's possible he was on an aromatase inhibitor, of course, and he just doesn't know it. Like, I guess that's entirely possible. My prediction is he is, in fact, using enough boldenone to crush his estrogen. I have seen this many times. And again, if you haven't read my article, I highly recommend you do. It was one of my most elaborate written pieces, and it references a lot of good data compiled by high-quality researchers as well on subreddits and whatnot, and other forums I'm a part of that compile a lot of this really obscure data and actually pay for high sensitivity testing and whatnot to make conclusions that are not going to be found, frankly, by anyone in the literature, because this shit is not being looked at. And, you know, I dug into a lot of rodent data to make these interpretations too and figured out some of this shit based on immunoassay and high sensitivity testing results. And in fact, we do see time and time again guys getting fucked up off EQ in regards to their estrogen getting driven into the ground. So I do think that's probably the reason.
Maybe he's taking something he thinks is vitamin D, and maybe it's not. I don't know. But he needs to figure that out.
I trained chest 2 weeks ago, and I literally just trained chest yesterday for the first time, and that it felt okay. It took 2 weeks for the soreness to go away and the knots to go away. And
he trained chest 2 weeks ago and hasn't trained it again till today. Well, maybe he trained too hard. If you're not recovering, you need to go easier. Can do, and if you're not recovered, go easier.
My testosterone levels are already pretty high, so we're not going to be running very much, right?
No, we're gonna be keeping you at 300.
Yet his blood markers indicate that he's taking too much testosterone, very clearly. But yet he's prescribed 300 milligrams a week. Don't know how it's legal. Certainly wouldn't happen in Canada. But hey, it's Canada. Just follow the rules of your country. I'm not saying they're breaking the law. I'm not accusing them of that. I'm just saying follow the rules of your country.
So the highest dose I've seen prescribed in Canada of deletestrol is 200 milligrams a week, which is pretty fucking aggressive, to be honest. But again, you could at least make the argument that that's therapeutic for some individuals. 300 milligrams, bro, like that is, you have a hard time justifying that. Like that's fucking cycle territory for sure. And you know, again, for a guy who wants to dial things in, like it sounds like his goal is to get his health in check before he kind of pushes the envelope. So again, I don't know why this approach is being taken with so many band-aids that are just going to exacerbate existing issues. Like again, they talk about adding in fucking DECA. They talk about adding in MK677, which is gonna fucking nuke his glucose even worse. His lipids are not going to survive and actually reacclimate to some homeostatic baseline that is representative of high quality health until he gets a lot of these androgens out of his system, corrects his diet perhaps, introduces some pharmacology alongside it. Like a lot of the shit is not going to be fixed and or improve doing what he's doing, especially adding more things in that's just making the problems worse. And on the surface, it sounds like, oh yeah, you know, these things are helping your joints. These things are helping the inflammation. It's like, no, these things are making everything fucking worse.
And where I'm from, no way in hell could I do this.
Right now, like I said, I'm not training 100%. Like I'm still dealing with injuries, so I'm not trying to blast. I want to get healthy right now. I want my body feeling good.
So if I owned an HRT clinic or I was a doctor, what would I do with him? I would lower his dose to 150 milligrams a week. I'd have him get retested about 3 days after he does the shot. I would have him skip a shot right now for a week because his testosterone levels are through the roof. It's very high. It's going to take time to slowly exit the system. So he should skip his next week's shot, allow his body get a break. He has plenty of testosterone, and then get his testosterone levels within normal range. Make his training easier than last time, not train to failure. Basically do a deload and continue to stretch and do cardio and be active. And then as he starts to feel better, we'd slowly up the weight, increase the intensity, progressive overload, train harder than last time, assuming he's not sore and feels good.
Yeah, so that's pretty in line with my hormonal recommendations I made already. And obviously the training recommendations make a lot of sense. That is a perfect, seems like a good approach to me.
That is what I would do, but I'm not a doctor. I'm just a coach. What would a coach know? I don't own an HRT clinic. I'm not a doctor, so my advice probably worthless, probably useless.
And then the next one you guys sent me was the nandrolone decanate. So for you guys,
Yep.
it's DECA.
Yep. For some of the aches and pains.
And that's not enough. 300 milligrams of test, it's not enough. We have to add in another 100 milligrams of DECA.
It's like, how ironic is it that right after he says he wants to get as healthy as possible, clean everything up, he's like, here's the deck I'm going to be adding on top of my 300 tests. Like, I don't know, man. Like, this guy should have been more educated, I think, about what he needs to do to get his shit in order, because this is not the approach.
I'm racing bicycles, getting faster than last time, and keeping my muscle.
That you guys sent, I wasn't expecting this, was the HCG.
And I'm against taking HCG on top of everything. Y'all know that, but whatever.
Is this something necessary right now? I'll take it. I just got to be careful. Is that what it is? Or careful?
It's actually your call. We recommend it. Our physician would recommend it.
No, they wouldn't all recommend it. I don't recommend it, and not all physicians do. Mine didn't for me. I can say that my physician and my endocrinologist did not recommend it whatsoever, never, ever, in all the years I've done HRT.
Yeah, so obviously this is a case-by-case basis thing, based a lot on, for example, maintenance of high-level fertility, steroidogenesis cascades if you're, using finasteride on TRT and you're worried about some shit. There's a lot of different case-specific scenarios for the deployment of HCG, and it doesn't mean every single person should do it. Again, it's kind of like, if you get into the thought process of, we would recommend it, in general, like you're getting into cookie-cutter territory.
The ibutamorin mesylate, which is the MK677. So I've heard a lot of stuff about this.
And he's on DHEA, and now comes up MK677. That is going to increase his appetite for sure. It's just another thing he's taking. It's just like, this video goes on forever.
So again, MK677 is a ghrelin receptor agonist that's going to crank your appetite through the fucking roof, which compared to GH, even though it will increase your IGF-1 within therapeutic limits, and it's based on endogenous pulsatile secretions, it is going to fuck his sugar levels. It's going to fucking fuck his blood sugar levels into the goddamn stratosphere, given that he has a fasting of 103 already. This is very problematic, and I would highly recommend against it if I was, the one advising him. This is not something that makes any sense whatsoever to be adding into his regimen right now. In fact, it's probably one of the last things I would be adding in given his baseline hormone profile and his biomarkers.
And it helps, like we talked about, we were worried about your inflammation, helps get rid of inflammation.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that because
So I don't see how helping inflammation, how does cranking your blood glucose up and causing beta cells to be burned out, giving you insulin resistance and progressing to diabetic neuropathy, helping with inflammation whatsoever. Like, it sounds like the complete opposite to me. So no, this is not a good idea in my opinion.
I feel like everything's inflamed.
Your estradiol levels are rock bottom. They're looking for every single thing, every pill, everything they can take to try and fix a problem. The problem is you have too low estrogen. You're taking too many PDs.
Yeah, and even like tying back to his HDL, like having that suppressed, like that's going to have a large interplay with his estrogen being crushed into the ground. That is something that is going to increase his HDL once he gets that into where it should be. Having your estrogen where you want it, having it proportionally equated to your testosterone, not inhibiting it, not doing anything to it, letting your body regulate it through its own aromatase enzymatic activity in target tissues. This is something you don't want to fuck with and have boldenone in your system or aromatase inhibitors in your system. This is something that is going to help modulate cardiovascular health and your lipid parameters as well. So again, like looking at all the wrong areas right now, looking at all the ways to band-aid shit before looking at the root of the problem, which frankly, a lot of the root of the problem is actually the stuff that he's on right now. He needs to really reel it back and just get down to therapeutic testosterone replacement, in my opinion, just avoid all the other fucking shit until his hormones have stabilized and everything is normalized and he's back to a normal homeostasis. His estrogen has got back to where it should be. You get a new baseline in his lipids. Hematology, you see if it corrects itself. You look at the, modulating the lipids perhaps with pharmacology, look at diet, look at lifestyle, look at sleep hygiene. And obviously the diet is a fucking problem too. If he's talking about eating cookies every night or whatever, I don't know if he's joking or not, but obviously that's an inflammatory problem. And to say, how do we correct me literally causing inflammation on myself with the foods I'm eating with pharmacology, like a stupid thing to say. A lot of stuff here, dude. A lot of stuff.
There's so many PDs and pills and things that they went over in this video. It's unbelievable. And this isn't even a cycle for a show. This is just normal. It's got so much stuff. They're taking so much stuff. And is it working? How does he look? How does he feel? Is it worth it? Is abusing PDs worth it?
Yeah, and again, even the pharmacology I mentioned with the acetamide for the lipids, perhaps you don't even need that if you're just on therapeutic replacement rather than 300 tests, 100 androlone, a bunch of androgen precursors with, adrenal steroids that you're taking exogenously. Shit like this is not necessarily stuff you need,
What's it called again?
Testosterone.
And it stimulates, so it's a replacement for GH.
Yes, it works faster and it's safer.
It works faster and it's safer. I've used tesamorelin probably 11 years ago. I don't know anyone that still uses this stuff. Is it safer than growth hormone that's prescribed by a doctor for anti-aging purposes in low doses? I don't know, maybe. But come on, you're using so many different pills and drugs. Do you really need all this stuff?
When it comes to peptides and GHRHs, GHRPs, some of these are prescribed because they're more cost effective, and some of these clinics make better margins on them too, so that's why they are heavily favored. But again, you have to keep in mind the price of pharmaceutical GH relative to some of this other shit. That is the large dictator a lot of times of the recommendations rather than if it's more effective or not. So this guy's saying it's better than GH, based on what, dude? This is like saying MK is better than GH, even though it's going to crank your appetite up and crank your blood glucose through the fucking roof even more so than GH. Maybe in some aspects it's superior, but in others it's far inferior. I guess it depends on the interpretation and the application for its use. And to be honest, tesamorelin is something I'm actually looking into specifically because of its popularity in the hormone replacement space. I'm looking closer at it, and I have had success in the past with GHRPs and GHRHs, but in general, the simplicity of growth hormone prevails over all of this shit when it comes to understanding the pharmacology. But it doesn't mean they don't have their places, and some of them are created in a way to be more favorable in certain aspects. But again, that depends on the case specific scenario. It's not always going to be the better alternative. Like again, if you had somebody who is trying to drive appetite, yeah, maybe something like a GHRP2 or GHRP6 or a MK might be superior than something like a recombinant HGH for that individual. But again, like that's a case scenario, that's a case specific scenario. That's not necessarily indicating that they're superior to GH, rather it's superior in like one aspect, but then they're also more side effect ridden in other aspects. So this is shit that has to be considered.
Try lifting weights, doing cardio, eating healthy, and then see what happens. Let's start there. So much of this shit, it's overkill. It's too much. It's too much. You start getting addicted to the addiction.
This was a lot fuller like 3 years ago.
Well, your stress level too, man. So we'll help you with that too. We got something for everything.
And your stress level too will help you with that. We got something for everything. Go to the gym and work out and eat healthy. That'll help your stress. Go to bed on time. Try not partying harder than last time too often. Have moderation. Balance work and play. This is ridiculous. We have this for that. Stress. Oh my goodness, we'll take this pill and inject that and sub-Q. It's too much. Join a gym, lift weights, do some cardio, and eat healthy. The rest, it'll fix itself. Ending it here. GregDoucette.com for coaching, Greg Doucette IP Pro. Bloops are there. Watch one of the bloops. Buy my freaking cookbooks or hire me for coaching if you need to lose weight.
Okay, so yeah, like pretty much echoing a lot of what Greg says in his video. This is a bit overkill. Jeremy talking about the hair loss thing. That's interesting. I didn't even know that was brought up, but that is, again, if you're trying to just get healthy and get everything dialed in before you crank things up a notch, should you be on 300 tests plus HCG plus nandrolone plus, did he mention DHEA and pregnenolone? I'm not going to go back and find out, but I wouldn't be surprised if they fucking did. Along with everything else he's on. Is this stuff, cranking up your IGF-1, is this stuff that you want to be doing when you're prone to hair loss too? Like, no, dude, like, again, your exposure should be timed for when you can tolerate it, and it's going to be actually, made the most use of rather than just always perpetually being on a blast essentially, which is frankly what this is. This is like a minor, maybe for IFBB pros, this is a minor blast, but I mean, for a lot of individuals, like this is a fucking blast, dude. So yeah, this is a bit much in my opinion. I think a lot of the biomarkers need to be assessed and dialed in before he does anything above and beyond therapeutic replacement. I think the dosages need to be dialed way back. I think a lot of compounds should be removed. I think he should just be on a baseline of tests, like Greg said, at a far more reasonable dosage. Get a reassessment of your lipids, your CBC, of your metabolic parameters, everything, and see if everything kind of self-corrects. And if not, where are the deficiencies and or imbalances lying? And then from there, you address those with a properly interpreted protocol based upon your actual baseline, not based on an EQ-ridden baseline, a fucking baseline with super physiological doses of test, a baseline filled with 50 other compounds that are fucking with your results. Get to a baseline on just your replacement and then go from there. So that is my overall stance. Pretty long video. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I had a lot of requests for this one. Hopefully you learned something. Like, subscribe, check out my blog, moreplacemordates.com. Follow me on Instagram at moreplacemordates. Facebook, Snapchat, BitChute, Twitter, TikTok, Apple Podcasts. Fuck, I'm like too tired to even remember what those are. What is it? The Instagram, the Facebook, the Snapchat, the BitChute. Not even on it. The TikTok, Apple Podcasts. Yeah, I think that's it. Any of the other podcast platforms are in the video description below as well. If you want to support the channel, you can check out anything I'm associated with in the video description below. My TRT clinic, it's all telemedicine from the comfort of your own home. I recommended lab tests and diagnostics, stay on top of your health, and as well as checking your biomarkers to actually know what you need rather than, just proactively jumping on a full gamut of shit. That is the kind of way you want to approach this stuff, in my opinion. I don't think you want to be just assume that you need to dial in, you know, like the dial in concept is a bit over exaggerated in the HRT space now. I think that a lot of individuals are going a bit overboard in certain aspects, trying to maximize literally every hormonal vector they can, when in reality, they might just need like one thing, if even. You know, sometimes individuals should just be getting their baseline blood work done and assessing what they can do from a lifestyle, sleep hygiene, and diet practice change in order to improve that. Not everyone needs TRT. Even if you're going to an HRT clinic, you should be getting your blood work done and then getting the high quality interpretation. And that could be worth the money spent in itself. Getting high quality patient care coordinators and doctors to interpret your stuff and make recommendations based on that if warranted, you know? So anyways, that's in the video description. My recommended lab tests and diagnostics to actually check your health and whatnot. Gorilla Mind, nootropic formulas, Gorilla Mode, pre-workout formulas that design myself from scratch, and anything else I'm associated with. It's all in the video description below. Thank you guys for watching. Talk to you soon.